Hoyoverse? Where are my Eula buffs? It has been 5 painful, agonizing years. I pulled for Eula. I pulled all of her best supports. I have a top 2% build for her. I waited 5 years for Eula buffs. Japanese yokai did it in 1 year. You're giving Cyno a buff before Eula? When was the last time we had a physical character? Hoyoverse, where are my Eula buffs? Hoyoverse. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be going over a lot of things I haven't talked about. It's been a while. For one, I guess the most recent information that has now been confirmed by Hoyoverse themselves is that we're going to be getting character buffs for Cyno, Wriothesley, Mizuki, Yae, Diona, Beidou, and Qiqi. And I've taken so long to record this video partially because I'm sick. Again. That we have a pretty decent amount of detail into what these character buffs are actually going to be. And then there's also some information on what Stellar Conduct does, so I guess we can talk about all of that in this video. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you are entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to my lovely channel members, I really appreciate your support, it means the world to me. Some of you have been here for way too long, please spend your money more wisely. Speaking of spending your money more wisely, since the version 6.6 banners are around the corner, if you want to spend more smartly, then I would like to announce a sponsor for today's video, EnjoyGM. EnjoyGM is a very safe and secure top-up site that provides discounts for all your favorite gacha games, while also keeping the same benefits you get in-game, like the first-time double top-up bonuses, and the only things you need to do is enter your UID and region, as you can see I'm doing here, and there's the luck and moon I got. This site offers great benefits as new users will receive an 8% off coupon for signing up, and for popular gacha titles, your first purchase comes with a dedicated 8 to 20% off coupon. Then after your first purchase is completed, you'll become a member and unlock exclusive pricing. So to save the most, make sure to use my exclusive link down below, get your game-specific first purchase bonus, which unlocks the discounted prices, and then apply your site-wide 8% off coupon. And if you need any further help or have questions, they have 24/7 human customer support. So click my link down below if you want to start saving. Thank you to EnjoyGM for sponsoring the video, and now back to it. So character buffs, we know what they are going to be. Well, a little bit of speculation first. For one, I don't see these characters listed being a faction, and because Barbeloth was the announcer for these buffs, I also don't think it's really going to be related to the Hexman Circle, especially after looking at what the buffs do as well. And another thing, I'm going to be guessing that all these characters will be given the Nordcry passive, where they're just able to enable Stellar Conduct, which is the new reaction coming out, and why they're buffing specifically Cryo and Electro characters, and also Mizuki. And the last thing I wanted to point out is that a lot of these characters are 80 cost characters that play in longer 20-second rotations. And I think that's interesting because especially if you look at Nordcry, the best DPSs at the time were all being played in very short rotations, or as short as possible. But especially now we've been getting buffs and off-field turrets that last so long, to where the game probably can support longer rotations much more easier. And where that was a flaw with a lot of these older characters, it may be an actual benefit now. Or well, maybe benefit isn't the right word, but may not be a hindrance. So for what Stellar Conduct is going to do, when Cryo and Electro come into contact under specific conditions, the special reaction Stellar Conduct will be triggered, and create a field called the Stellar Glow domain. Inside this domain, when enemies are struck with Cryo or Electro damage, the domain will seal the elemental energy, and every 3 seconds the elemental power will be unleashed, and turn into buffs that affect everyone on the team inside the domain. And this will give a Cryo and Electro damage bonus, as well as raising the base reaction multiplier of Stellar Conduct damage. And it seems that to keep this field up, as well as applying the buffs, you need to be triggering Stellar Conduct at least every 3 seconds. And also it decreases physical resistance? What if it won't? And also, like with Lunar Bloom, Stellar Conduct doesn't deal damage, and only characters that have it in their talents can deal it directly, but the reaction damage itself doesn't really exist. So the only Stellar Conduct damage that will exist is direct Stellar Conduct damage, kind of like how the only Lunar Bloom damage that exists is direct Lunar Bloom damage. And also adding on to what the reaction does, this is most likely where the character buffs will come into play, as it says that being within the Stellar Conduct field will enhance some characters' talents. talents. This already is more creative of a reaction than every lunar reaction combined. I actually do like it so far, and I think it's interesting, as it seems to not just be characters getting wheelchaired. Anyways, let's get into the individual character buffs, starting with Beidou. Beidou's main issue has always been her independence. On release up until around Sumeru, she was actually tied to a very strong 4-star only team known as Taser, where she had pretty decent AoE damage that peaked in 2-target situations, and then characters like Fischl and Jingcho were mostly handling stuff on the single target side. But at the point that we got to in Sumeru, a lot of teams wanted to have Jingcho or Fischl or Sucrose, and none of them really wanted to have Beidou, as Beidou's energy requirements are so high, so without someone like Fischl who's in a mega electro battery, unless you wanted to build a ridiculous amount of ER in Beidou, there wasn't really a way you were going to be able to use her by herself, and she didn't really offer anything besides damage, and some very minor sustaining, so if you removed Fischl from Beidou teams, there wasn't really anything left for Beidou as a solo character. These buffs seem to be aiming to target her independence issue, as her A4 talent is getting upgraded, where if you hold on Beidou's elemental skill, it will continue to increase in level until it reaches its maximum, even if you don't get hit, and this seems to just remove the demand for her to perfect parry, which is of course nice as it's extra damage, and it generates extra energy for her over doing a normal skill. And the translation on this isn't very clear, or at least it doesn't make sense to me, but when Beidou holds down her skill, she needs to be hit twice in order for it to reach its like full damage thing. The translation here says that each stack of that will reduce her skill cooldown by 4 seconds and restore 8 energy to Beidou. So following that logic, if it's 2 stacks, this would reduce her skill by 8 seconds and restore 16 energy to Beidou, and this can only happen once every 15 seconds, so you can't just do it back to back with like Sacrificial or something. But an 8-second skill reduction would mean she just gets her skill back for free, which is a double skill cast, and this would just eliminate her energy requirements. If you could get 2 fully stacked 4 particle skills back to back on top of 16 energy every rotation, and this would definitely make her more independent at the cost of field time, I guess. Her C6 is also going to be getting a slight enhancement, as when you are in a stellar conduct field, cryo resistance will also be decreased alongside the 15% electro res shred, and the active character will gain 200 elemental mastery. Jesus Christ. Very safe to say that Beidou's most likely going to be very relevant going into the stellar meta. Oh, and I kind of just realized something. The skill cooldown reduction still doesn't really make sense to me. It might be a burst cooldown reduction, and it's a mistranslation, because these are all translations. And I feel like a burst cooldown reduction is more likely than a skill reduction to get 2 skills, but maybe. Now let's move on to Diona. She was already good before, and they honestly didn't really change her that much. They kind of just made her Cyno. After using your elemental skill, for the next 20 seconds, whenever party members trigger Superconduct, Stellar Conduct, or Cryo Swirl, Diona will additionally fire 3 cat claws in coordination. These cat claws do not generate particles, nor will they create shields, so it seems to just be for some damage and cryo application, and this can happen every 3.5 seconds. One of Diona's drawbacks was the fact that she didn't really apply cryo that much. Even her burst ticks apply cryo every other hit, and they're quite slow, so her now having application every 3.5 seconds is really good. Now for her C6, it gains 2 additional benefits. For 1, Diona's max HP is increased by 25%, and for 2, within the stellar conduct field, characters inside Diona's burst gain increased damage from Superconduct, Stellar Conduct, and Cryo Swirls, which on top of the 200 elemental mastery Diona already provides is going to make her a pretty good amp for these stellar teams. Now, moving on to the GOAT, Qiqi. And if you think about it, Qiqi getting buffed means that Eula is also getting buffed, as obviously when you bring Eula, you bring Qiqi as a battery. I'm going insane. Qiqi's Ascension 4 is getting enhanced when she's in a Stellar Conduct field, where the chance to generate a talisman is increased to 100%, and the cooldown is getting cut in half from 30 seconds to 15 seconds, just making her a more consistent sustain. Qiqi's elemental skill is also getting buffed, Independence to Stellar Conduct, where when the active character hits an enemy, the Herald will perform a cryo coordinated attack, and we don't yet have information on the interval. Qiqi's burst is also getting buffed, where on top of the base effect, she's going to deal additional cryo damage that is considered direct stellar superconduct damage. Sub DPS Qiqi build real? And quickly going over her constellations, C1 allows Qiqi to generate additional energy every 6 seconds when her skill deals damage. C2 increases Qiqi's attack by 50% when she's in a stellar conduct field. C4 allows Qiqi to heal the lowest HP ally whenever a talisman is triggered, equal to 180% of Qiqi's attack, which makes her have consistent team-wide healing even without her burst. And Qiqi's C6 makes it that when you cast her burst, she gains 4 stacks of Profound Insight, and when the active character besides Qiqi Qiqi, deals direct stellar conduct damage. She gives a quill equal to 600% of Qiqi's attack. I have a lot of thoughts on this. It really does seem like they're incentivizing you to build Qiqi on a more DPS oriented build, now that you actually get energy for her, and her burst is going to be a nuke. So Qiqi is really going to become a sub DPS slash healer-ish type of character now, which I think is very hilarious. But yes, this kind of did fix all of Qiqi's issues. She now generates energy. She now does something else besides healing, which seems to be damage, and damage amplification to stellar reactions at C6. So there is somewhat of a reason to use her now. So to everyone who has accumulated a C6 Qiqi, she is no longer a brick, you're welcome. Speaking of bricks, next we have Mizuki. I don't know which, but it seems like one of her passive talents is getting buffed, where after Mizuki triggers a swirl reaction while in her skill state, the next damage she deals will be increased by up to 1000% of Mizuki's elemental mastery, and this effect can be triggered every 2.5 seconds. Additionally, while she's in her skill state, your team will receive an elemental mastery buff based on 10% of Mizuki's EM. C1 gives Mizuki an additional attack every 3.5 seconds that scales with 1000% of Mizuki's EM, which is kind of nuts for an MV, but we move. And this does happen alongside the increased swirl damage the enemy takes. Mizuki C2 is being replaced completely, and instead of the damage bonus you got per elemental mastery, it is now going to be a Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, and Onoma Res Shred by 20%, which in all honesty is probably a better buff. Mizuki C4 is just more healing, and Mizuki C6 on top of giving swirls crit rate, which is what they did already, Mizuki herself will now also gain crit rate for every 100 elemental mastery above 500, which will be capped at 20 crit rate with 80 crit damage, and she needs 1000 total EM to cap this out, which is very easy to achieve. If you haven't noticed, none of these buffs are going to be tied to stellar conduct, or at least it seems like that, and I hope it isn't. So these are just base Mizuki buffs that are probably going to at least make her the best Onamo driver right now, with her now also having real constellations. But sadly, unless we get better sub DPS that synergize with Mizuki, that has always been her main issue, I don't really know if these buffs are going to do enough to really push her forward into the meta. But for now, these are fine buffs. She should at least be better than Aoife, and I can actually make a video on this pretty soon. Next up, we have the Goat Wriothesley, where his Ascension 1 is being enhanced, where if he is inside a stellar conduct field, the 3rd and 5th hit of his normal attack string, on top of his charge attack, will now be stellar conduct hits, and his stellar conduct damage is also going to be increased by 30%. And that is going to be it for his base kit changes. He just has a lot of stellar reaction hits now. Wriothesley C1 is now just going to enhance his stellar reaction damage even more, so his C1 is like actually useful now. And C2 now enhances his Ascension 1 passive even more, to where it deals even more stellar conduct damage. Wriothesley has just received MV scaling increases, that's about it. And since he's a limited character, I'm not going to dwell on his other constellations too much. His C4 and C6 are going to be on screen, you can pause to read it. But honestly, I really like these changes for Wriothesley, making him a stellar conduct DPS. Wriothesley really doesn't have that many kit issues at a base. He just was never given his own niche as a cryo DPS, and now he has a niche that the other cryo DPSs currently can't tap into, so that's going to make him stand out from the older characters at least, and I hope to any Wriothesley mains that have invested a lot into him, this can be their stellar DPS that clears all the shields comfortably. So yes, good changes all around, even if boring. Wriothesley didn't really need that much. Now we move on to talk about the king of sin himself, Cyno. All of his buffs are stellar conduct related. His A1 is now going to be electro stellar conduct damage, replacing his old electro damage, and his A4 is going to enhance that by 600% of Cyno's elemental mastery, which is much more than the other enhancements. Oh, and I take it back, this is a buff not related to stellar conduct, but when you use Cyno's elemental skill, if he's not in his burst state, he can now briefly enter the burst state for 6 seconds. This should allow Cyno to technically run shorter rotations. It's going to help with energy too, so overall this is just a nice quality of life, as you're no longer really that locked down to the burst cooldown or the energy it requires, at least for a short amount of time. Cyno C1 gives him 200 elemental mastery upon being in a stellar conduct field and being in his burst state, and if Cyno switches out while his burst state is still active, the elemental mastery buff will be passed on to the next character with the remaining burst duration. So this makes you actually have somewhat more of a reward for swapping out Cyno early, as his skill up time is way too long, and again further encourages the idea of shorter rotations with Cyno. Cyno C2 is a ramping stellar conduct damage buff that is also up to 50% like the base C2, and you can read the rest for yourself. I'll leave it on screen for 3, 2, 1. Obviously these Cyno changes are good. Like with Wriothesley, they took a character that didn't really have a defined team archetype, and now they've kind of just given you a reason to use Cyno with stellar teams. And they actually did give him a quality of life enhancement via his skill allowing him to enter his burst state, which is going to help offset some of his energy needs, as you can spend some field time in his burst state, on top of allowing you to run shorter rotations, so that's just nice quality of life. And his constellations seem to actually be good now. W Cyno. Now lastly, the buffs I think I'm personally the most excited for, Yae. And they gave her a lot of changes. When Yae has 3 turrets on the field and she recasts her elemental skill, this will cause each recast of her elemental skill to do electro damage. And if you are within a stellar field, this damage will be electro-stellar conduct damage. Yae is also going to be getting an additional passive, where her totems now last 24 seconds, and whenever stellar conduct is triggered, the next lightning strike from her turret will have its damage increased by 80% of Yae's attack, and this can happen every 2.5 seconds. And if Yae is in the stellar conduct field, whenever her turrets deal damage, they also deal an additional electro hit that is considered stellar reaction damage. So she's getting a lot more turret damage and also getting stellar conduct hits too. And Yae's constellations are also getting a massive glow up, with her giving a 40% damage bonus to electro and stellar conduct damage whenever stellar conduct is triggered. And with her C2, Yae will give herself and the on-field character EM up to 200 depending on her Sakura totem level. And you can read the rest of the constellations for yourself. And even without stellar conduct, these are just good changes. With her totems lasting for 24 seconds and all the additional scaling she's getting, these buffs are pretty much specifically targeted at making her a better sub DPS, and it does indeed do its job at that, but I think I am a little upset that they kind of neglected on-field Yae, besides just giving her an extra attack when recasting her skill. Yae on release was so not good at being a sub DPS, but her damage was actually pretty good, so on-fielding her so she could gain extra benefits from buffs actually became her ideal playstyle in things like Chevru's teams, or teams like Aggravate. But now that she's just a better sub DPS, you won't really have to cope with that, which is nice. So yes, the Yae changes are good. Also, both Yae and Wriothesley's weapons are getting changes that make them synergize better with stellar reactions, so you won't have to shift weapons for them. And also for the free-to-plays, Widsith is just going to be better on both Wriothesley and Yae, since their best teams are going to be stellar conduct. So now none of the buffs are really griefs. Okay, so I'm happy I recorded this while still being in the Yae section. Apparently her burst still does destroy the turrets, but regardless, her turrets last for 24 seconds anyways, so there is still no real reason to go on field with her twice. You just don't use her burst anymore. But this does mean you can start rotations by using 3 of Yae's skills, and since her turrets last for so long now, at the end of your rotations that's when you're going to burst, and then you can recast her skills. So I guess that's what you would do now for off-field Yae. And also another correction that does change some things. This may hopefully change, but it doesn't seem like the buffed units are able to create stellar fields by themselves, and the only character right now capable of doing that is Sandrone, and a lot of some of the characters' changes are tied to a stellar field, like all of Wriothesley's kit. So there is a chance that you are going to need to pull for Sandrone if you want to use the new changes right now, or at least some of the new changes right now, and then maybe they'll give a free 4-star, or someone like Cryo Traveler can enable the stellar field. And to be fair, it was also said in the pre-beta that Columbina wouldn't enable all lunar reactions, but then in live she's obviously able to do that. So the two possibilities are that it's missing currently from their kits like with Columbina, or they just can't do it. Going off of the assumption that they can't do it, this doesn't really change anything about Mizuki. None of what she does is tied to stellar conduct as far as I can see. Diona only loses her 40% stellar conduct and cryo swirl buff, but she still gets her extra coordinated attacks, and she's a support anyway, so you most likely were going to use her with Sandrone anyways, so I guess she isn't impacted that much. Qiqi is kind of affected as her passive is still the same 50% chance for every 30 seconds to trigger a talisman, which sucks. Pretty much all of her constellations besides her C4 don't function anymore. Her burst nuke also disappears, so the only thing she really keeps from her buff is her coordinated attack. As I said before, Wriothesley literally loses everything, and he doesn't even really synergize with Sandrone, so if he isn't able to create a stellar conduct field himself, he will probably not really see play until Sneznaya, where we do hopefully get supports that can can create stellar fields. So Wriothesley's buffs will basically be delayed by an extra patch. I hope the Wriothesley mains enjoy Nicole. Cyno will also lose all his extra stellar conduct damage, so his damage is mostly going to remain the same, but his passive of being able to enter his burst state from his skill alone seems to not be tied to the stellar field, so Cyno having no energy requirements and maybe being able to be quick swapped is still a reality even without the stellar field. Yae still gets the extra turret duration on top of the extra damage from recasting her skills, and I guess just triggering base superconduct still gives her the extra MV from her passive, but it's going to be a lot weaker and probably not worth it. But for Yae, this shouldn't be that bad anyways, as once again, Yae is a sub DPS, you can just play her with Sandrone, and for Beidou, the only thing she really loses is her C6, so you don't get the cryo res shred or 200 EM to the active character, but her being more independent from holding down her skill is still going to be added to her base kit. And once again, you should be able to play her with Sandrone, as Beidou is a sub DPS, so she isn't really losing much. This does kind of suck for Cyno and Wriothesley exclusively, as they are on-field DPSs without any support for stellar conduct. Cyno can, I guess, quick swap alongside Sandrone, but that's probably going to be cringe, and Wriothesley just pretty much isn't getting a buff at all in this patch. Hopefully creating stellar fields will be more accessible in 7.0, but this does ultimately kind of sour the changes a bit. I don't see why these characters can't just enable stellar reactions and stellar fields by themselves, whatever. I wouldn't even be mad if they did the Hex Rye thing at this point and make them enable stellar reactions when there's at least 2 of them in the party. And I was going to try and discuss some of Sandrone's stuff in this video, but her full kit is now out and this recording is nearly 20 minutes long, so I think I'm just going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on all these changes, as I would love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. Hugs and kisses to you all. Thank you to everyone else for watching the video, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.